Hey, good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, good
Hi.
morning.
Morning.
I'm super excited because we're doing part two of our show on Reveal AI. And we've got Zach Wright on this morning, and we have Bob Dimicco, the CEO of Reveal AI, on the show today. So we're super excited. So we talked to Bob probably what 3 weeks ago, I think, and we talked a little bit about there was gonna be a live AI interactive demo that was going to be set up, and you could answer questions about that as it related to return to office. And that demo has concluded, and there's going to be some results. So we get to talk a little bit about that and some other things with Reveal AI. So Bob, you want to say hi and talk a little bit about Reveal, and then maybe we'll get into the gist of what the campaign data was.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, Heather, Ray, and Jason, thanks very much for having Zach and I on. We're excited to share some of the really interesting things that came out of this research study, this interview campaign. And to step back just a little bit, maybe for folks who didn't join us for part one of this, Reveal AI, we're a startup that has developed an interview basically on steroids, an interview at scale. We use AI technology to create a conversational survey, if you will. And unlike something like Chat GPT, where you ask it questions, in this case, for our interview, our AI bot actually asks the questions and responds accordingly. And then we collect all of that information and then analyze it quantitatively and qualitatively to produce a application that our users and customers and partners can access to pull out all these wonderful insights and actionable intelligence and exemplar responses that really epitomize what people are saying. Some HR leaders have called this a universal listening tool because just like a human interview, you change the questions, you change the nature of the inquiry and the discovery. So about a month ago, we were noticing in the headlines there was a real emphasis on return to the office. And in talking with Jason, Ray, Heather, other partners with whom we work, HR leaders, and just members of our friends and family, we were sensing just a lot of energy and interesting tension around, well, what's best? Work from home, return to office. What do people prefer? How does it vary? We're working with people in Europe and people in Asia, other parts of the world. So we were curious. We said, hey, what a wonderful way to both demonstrate our AI interview and give people an experience of something that's new, unique, connecting, and engaging, and do this research study to help us all understand more about people's perspectives and input. So, we put this together, and
Yeah, it's really cool that you did this at this time because you're right. This topic is still of intense interest to people.
yep.
Last week, I was on the HR Dive panel, and I was one of the panelists along with a panelist from Gartner, and our topic was return to work. And and this is a virtual panel, and we had over 250 people on the virtual panel about this topic. So it really still is top of mind. So, do you want to give us a high level overview of the interview campaign data that you came up with through Reveal?
Yeah, sure. So there's two probably main points that came up from these questions, and we can get into details around models and why, and we can talk a little bit about people's perspectives on how it's impacted culture and performance. If we step back, though, there were two main things that became really clear. No one size fits all, and hybrid is the catch-all for what most organizations are deploying as their policy. When we say no one size fits all, It really means that, depending upon an organization's focus, whether, let's say, a government organization, retail organization, financial services, whatever it is, depending upon the culture, where they're located in the US or where they're located globally, all those things factor into what's the right policy for their organization, their function, their department, their location. And it's really clear that no one size fits all. At the same time, if we look at, okay, what are most organizations doing? The label they're putting on it is hybrid. Why? Because it's a blend, it's a mixture of work from home, in the office some days, maybe work remotely, but it's not from home because you're on the road or something like that. So those are the two probably biggest takeaways that came from all the participants in the study.
Are there any other trends you're seeing in the responses?
Well, one thing that came through loud and clear, and that is that employees they're looking for flexibility and autonomy. To some extent, we've got a couple of things happening at the same time here over the last 5 years. One is the pandemic. The pandemic forced everyone into, or a significant portion of employees into a remote only mode for weeks, if not months on end. And people got used to that flexibility. People got used to that autonomy. And so, this notion of, we want you to come back to the office, it feels like something's being taken away. The flexibility, the autonomy, there's one thing. Another aspect that's going on is digital natives, folks that are generally in their 20s, 30s, maybe early 40s, that grew up with technology. They're super comfortable with technology. For some of them, especially in their 20s, they may not have experienced a lot of time in the office. And so for them, looking at their level of productivity, looking at a company or the organization's level of productivity, they're looking at this and saying, well, I don't see any real big benefit in going back to the office. I'm able to do my job and interact with my colleagues and things like that. So for them, perhaps especially because of who they are, this sense of giving up autonomy is a real concern. The other thing, Jason, is that there is no perfect policy, in the sense that every policy has limitations and drawbacks. And here's an example. You would think that the people who want flexibility and autonomy and who are given the opportunity, the privilege to work from home, would be, happy as clams, and everything's, super fun for them. Well, what they said was there are a couple drawbacks and limitations to that. One is, when do they unplug? Is it, 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30? If they did a childcare drop off for half an hour, in the morning, or pick somebody up after school, that's the flexibility and autonomy that they got and enjoyed because they were working from home. But does that mean they got to make up that time? And do they make up that time, before dinner, after dinner, or is there just this, between 6 and when they go to bed, there's this mixture of homework time and work time and dinner time and things like that. And so for some people, that's a real limitation, because they're missing the clear separation. Because I finished my day in the office, I drove home, or took public transportation, and now I'm more in a home mode. The other kind of factor of there's no perfect policy is this sense of, if I'm working from home or working remotely, and I'm missing an opportunity to spend some time with my colleagues, my manager, my manager's manager, because they're in the office occasionally. Am I missing out? Kind of the fear of missing out. Am I missing out on, people do still sometimes go out for lunch, or they get together around the water cooler, or that person that is presenting in the office, do they have an advantage because they can pick up on, physical, cues of people also in the office compared to someone remotely? And so there is that fear that in some way, shape, or form, they're missing out because they're not in the office. So that's the other, aspect of there's just no perfect policy.
Exactly. And I think we've talked about that a lot, and you hit the nail on the head. Almost all of these policies for any organization have to be designed specifically for that organization. When you were going through this, did you find any important takeaways for the business leaders that answered these questions, or from employees that answered these questions?
Well, there's a big takeaway, and this is, yes, very clear to the work from home, return to office. However, Jason and Ray, this is something that we talked about months ago when we started our partnership, and we began to see in February of this year when we really had companies using Reveal for the second and the third time. And that is, people want to be heard. People want to be treated as individuals. When we started this company, we knew that this universal listening device was certainly going to help leaders to collect and analyze information, make better decisions. What we've also found, and this is especially true for digital natives, is it gives them an opportunity to be heard in their own words. In general, we can look at this cohort. They're a little bit on the idealistic side in some ways. They don't want their perspective reduced to a number. They understand and appreciate the value of kind of traditional surveys, and at the same time, when given an opportunity to express themselves in their own words, they love it. I've had a couple of HR leaders say that when they, kind of ask people, what was this like, this concept of, texting your response with this AI bot? The feedback was, it listened to me. I felt the organization was listening to me. I felt connected and engaged in a way that I hadn't before. For topics like this that are kind of emotionally, mentally, and physically loaded with a lot of perspectives and energy, in particular the digital native cohort, being able to express themselves and feel listened to was really, really important. If we step back a second, something that I didn't realize until a few months ago, we were looking into this. Take a look at the US economy. In 2021, 77% of the US economy was considered by the federal government services. So that's retail, financial services, state and local and federal government, professional services, consulting. Those are just some of those. When you look at those services business, what's their biggest asset? Their people. We all know that. It's their people. Well, you break it down and you look at some of those sectors, guess what? The majority of their employees are digital natives. They're folks that are, under 40 or under 42 or 38 or something like that. And they have a very different perspective than those of us who, let's say, have been in the workforce longer, and maybe we've gotten used to, just traditional survey, put a number in, things like that. This group wants to be heard in a different way. They behave in a different way. Their preferences are different. And so the organizations, and in particular the HR leaders that can lean into this and figure out how to keep leveraging the tools like a traditional survey that have worked, complement it with this, kind of AI listening to connect and engage with people in a unique way. They're the ones that are going to have that degree of loyalty, engagement, input, and level of connectiveness and buy-in for employees in ways that other organizations just aren't. So that was another thing that kind of came through here loud and clear, is the importance of giving employees a platform to feel included because they're sharing their perspective and their desires in their own words.
So let me ask you
Mhm.
this, and if you can't phrase it this way, you can tell me I'm wrong. But could you say that that segment of employees feels more comfortable interacting and sharing, difficult and hard conversations with an AI than it does with an actual sort of with an actual human being? Would that be somewhat accurate?
Absolutely, Jason. And I don't know all the reasons why in terms of, certainly, my kids are digital natives. My brothers, my family, most of us have kids that are digital natives. And we don't always know why that, a text message works better than, let's say, calling mom or dad when you're at college, or, something like
Mhm.
that. But it's very clear that it's true. And I was almost shocked when some of these HR leaders were telling us that when they were, having conversations with their, store employees or their frontline employees or something like that, and they were asking them, what was it about this, experience with the, the interview bot from Reveal? And again, they said it felt very empathetic. And the person was like, well, you were having a conversation with an AI bot. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's okay. It still felt empathetic. So for them, perhaps because so many of them grew up with, different types of digital games that they interacted with, perhaps because, from an early age, they were texting with their friends, they were interacting with digital apps. For them, this just feels very natural, and getting empathy from an interview bot for them is just very comfortable in a way that for someone perhaps older, they'd be like, well, I prefer my empathy the old-fashioned way, someone, standing next to me, or something like that. That's just not the case with them. This was a huge eye opener for us, as I mentioned, back in February and March, when we were getting this feedback. And, all of us founders are over 50 for Reveal AI. It was surprising, and we dug into it. And what we also found, this is fascinating, is that, for a lot of our interview campaigns, just like this one, there's a question that asks, how long have you been in the workforce? I mean, that's a proxy for, roughly how old you are. By and large, digital natives use more words to express themselves in these interviews compared to people who are older. So they actually provide more raw material for an HR leader to extract, insights and perspectives of, what these people are feeling. That was just, fascinating for us. We certainly couldn't have predicted it.
That is very interesting. I would have thought, the more the emoji, short phrases, like, for thanks, THX and whatnot. So that is very interesting information.
Heather, it does depend a little bit on the energy and the intensity around a particular issue. Maybe we could say that for issues or topics that are important for HR leaders, where maybe opinions have settled down a little bit, and there's been, the issue isn't so raw or whatever, maybe that may not be true. For things like, people have used Reveal for getting input and feedback and discovering perspectives on, benefit information, compensation information, work from home information, acquisition integration, so on and so forth. Those are things where, typically there is either a problem that's trying to be solved, a crisis that's trying to be managed, or an opportunity that's trying to be seized. And for most of those, a large percentage of the workforce really wants to engage. It's one of the reasons that, compared to traditional surveys, what we've been told is that the completion rate for our AI interviews is much higher, like 2 or 3 times higher than a traditional survey, because once people kind of get into it, it's like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, I'm really being asked my opinion. Oh, there's some active listening from the AI bot. It wants more. It's asked me for an example. Okay, well, I'll give it an example.
That's great. And I think
It
that
is.
that kind of information is super critical to be able to let people know about, because there's so many misconceptions about what's really going to happen with AI as it gets into corporate America, so that the sense that people feel more comfortable with it than people would actually think is really critical for us to advocate for. So I love that.
Jason,
Can you
here's
talk?
here's
Go
an
ahead, Bob.
analogy. Here's an
Yeah.
analogy that I've started using with HR leaders. If we go back to maybe 2010, 2012, 2013, one of the major changes that was happening in the industry was the introduction of cloud services, software as a service. Now, for those of us like me and you guys that worked at Cisco, we were working with large customers who had their compute and data center on their premise. They looked at, Amazon Web Services, and they kind of were like, what's this? No serious company is certainly going to purchase their, compute services from the cloud, and what we saw was that there were chief information officers who really leaned into the cloud and said, I'm going to do a pilot or two because my board is asking me for a cloud strategy and I need to start learning, and my team needs to start learning. They were typically the most successful in navigating that transition. The least successful were the CIOs and their teams who simply said, this will never work. We don't need to learn about it. The cloud isn't secure. It's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Many of them 3 years later were looking for new jobs because their boards or their senior leadership were saying, we didn't see the nimbleness of even learning what cloud was all about. I offer that analogy to HR leaders and say, AI has and will create disruptions that none of us can foresee. It's just way too early. But find a place to start. Do a pilot with us, of course, just to learn. Here's where applied AI can help with listening. It's a fairly benign use case. And in so doing, you're going to take some steps to really learn, kind of what AI is, what AI isn't. And in the context of helping yourself and your organization, be more prepared for where you want to apply AI and where AI is not necessarily a good fit, for your organization or, the areas for which you have responsibility.
Yeah, and that's a really good point,
Yeah.
because we have some other AI folks that we've been talking to, and they say something almost exactly the same. And one of the things that they're actually saying is that HR people and some CHROs are falling way behind in adoption of AI. And what's happening is that other parts of the organization, such as IT and others, are coming in and owning all the AI tools. And in some instances, the AI tools that they're bringing in or thinking about utilizing aren't necessarily the ones that HR would want to have, would be their first choices. So the fact that HR is behind the curve is not something that they should be doing. And to your point, start small and start a pilot and start learning about it, because you're going to be faced with these disruptions. So you might as well, get on board.
Jason, that's so well said. I mean, if folks want to Google the word shadow IT, it was what was happening in, organizations, 10, 12 years ago, where when the CIO and her or his team were essentially saying, no experimentation, no pilots, no nothing. Other parts of the company or the business were saying, well, let's just try this. It's cheaper, or I can do something on my own, whereas the IT organization may take 2 months to get to me because, they've got bigger priorities and things like that. And all of a sudden, within 2-3 years, there was a lot of control and organizational power that IT organizations no longer had, because all of a sudden every department was like the wild, wild west. Well, I want to use that service and I want to use that service. And so for the HR leaders, Jason, you're spot on. This is an opportunity, whether it's with Reveal or some of the other partners that you folks have. Do a pilot, call it a proof of concept, so that you've reduced the risk, you've reduced a little bit of the pressure of having a big success. Do it with a business unit or a function or a geography. See how it works. Learn from it. And in particular for HR leaders, it will give you a different voice at the senior leadership table, because you're speaking from some AI learning relative to IT, relative to other functions who may be embracing it more quickly, and maybe not in the ways that ultimately are the best for the organization when it comes to employees.
If you want a success, use Reveal and Thrive for your first just big bang success. When you're using AI as your first sort of test, that would be my recommendation.
It's on our website. Our AI interview tool has now been used 25,000 times by organizations like NASA, U.S. Army, a wide range
of small organizations, right?
Yeah, small organizations. Yeah. We have plenty of smaller organizations as well. But yeah, we would love to partner with Thrive and help an HR leader, just get started with with a step that feels right for them.
Can you just tell us something about what you just mentioned? What have you learned at Reveal from conducting large scale interview campaigns, and then maybe even smaller scale ones? Can you share with us about that?
Sure. It's a great question, Jason. So some of our customers and clients have used this with dozens of participants, hundreds of participants, and thousands of participants. It just depends on the size of the organization, the problem they're trying to solve, or what they're trying to discover. Now, you might think that if it's dozens and dozens, maybe 50, 60, or 70, you don't get the statistical significance that quantitative research folks love to talk about. And to some extent that's true. However, what you do get is a listening mechanism. You get to hear people in their own words, and you're still going to get plenty of insights and quantitative intelligence to help with your to inform your decision, to inform the what you're trying to discover. And then certainly if it's up into the hundreds or even the thousands, the quantitative significance increases, or statistically, and you also just get now you've got hundreds of people that feel listened to. You've got their opinions, you've got their perspectives. One of the things that our customers love to do is kind of take the output and they'll turn it into maybe a few PowerPoint slides. What they love to do on a PowerPoint slide is, let's say on the left of the slide, they'll highlight with a few bullets the key takeaways or the key actions. And then on the right side, they will copy in what we call an exemplar. An exemplar is a verbatim response from a participant that epitomizes that point. And we heard from the CEO of one of our Fortune 500 companies that use this, who said he's sitting in a presentation and the person who was our customer was going through the presentation. And he said the combination of having some quantifiable information and an actionable insight, and then reading that verbatim response from an employee or from a customer, he said it connected with him in a way that was just so visceral. It's like, oh, of course, because he was reading that one comment, from somebody in their own words, and it connected with the action or the insight or the takeaway that was on the left side of the PowerPoint. So that's kind of the power of bringing all these things together.
That is amazing, and we love that. So, is there anything else, Zach or Bob, that you want to tell us about the campaign and what you found out?
There is one more item, Jason, that I think is helpful for people, and that's, one of the things that when the pandemic started, I was with a company that went fully remote, and at that time I had a team of 100 plus engineers and product managers and data scientists and everything like that. Two things I was worried about: culture and performance and productivity. We actually asked those questions in this campaign about work from home, return to office. The responses indicated that when it came to culture, people felt that the impact on work from home remote was mixed. There were some concerns that there was some in-person bonding activities and time that was kind of missed. But on the other hand, people said that leaders and teams were compensating for this. There were tools that they were using. There were activities that they were doing online, like digital games, that were bringing people together in kind of a new way. And so they were feeling that from a cultural standpoint, yeah, there were some things that they missed, but there were other things that were new. And it was also forcing managers and leaders to think about team culture in a more intentional way, because they didn't have the opportunity of maybe a decade ago when more people worked in the same location and you could go to lunch together or go have drinks or something traditional like that. And when it came to kind of performance and productivity, again, the picture was mixed, because you had some folks where they self-described their performance and productivity as dipping because they missed the energy and the collaboration of being together with others in the office. On the other hand, you had other people who said our performance and productivity increased because we're not commuting 45 minutes one way. We've got 90 more minutes back in our day. And in most cases, we were applying that to our jobs. And so we just had more time. We had more focused time. And so their productivity rose. So that's just kind of some interesting feedback that we got. And a little bit of a surprise, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ray, do you have a question for Bob?
No, but I mean, it sounds, Bob, from all of the the research and the results, is that the key is flexibility for employees, and the other key is finding ways to engage and solicit employee feedback in ways that that make an impact to the employee. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely right. Especially because, again, there's no one size that fits all. There's
Hmm.
no perfect, and that different people work better under different conditions, and the aspect of listening to your stakeholders, of getting their input, knowing that only 80% of them may be thrilled with the policy that you come up with. The other 20%, at least if they're listened to, there's just going to be more buy-in and support and engagement and a feeling like, I may not have gotten exactly what I wanted. However, I can support this, I can buy into it, and I can still feel connected to the whole.
Yeah,
So
that's
how did you say that
fantastic.
again? Different people work.
Different
How do
people
you?
work better under different conditions.
Yeah, that's really
Different.
good. That's really well said. I like that. We've talked about this for a long time in a lot of different formats, and nobody has really articulated like that. So I love that. So we're going to steal that, and I think that's a really important point in this whole return to office, remote hybrid work story. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's like, one of the things that also came out was managers. One of the questions was, are you a manager? Yes. Okay. Well, looking at the data, people who are managers and getting input from their employees, their preferred policy was hybrid. For some managers, it was 2 days in the office, 3 days remote. For others, it was 3 days in the office, 2 days remote. And that's like 70% of the managers who responded, it was with that, hybrid model. And it was some, variation of, 2 or 3 days one way or the other, and at least one day a week in the office, and up to 4 days remote. Some of the managers, they wanted, hey, everyone in the office that's within a 45-minute commute on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, so that everyone was together at least one day a week. For others, it didn't necessarily matter. They just wanted people in, one day a week. And managers themselves were typically, somewhere on this 2 to 3 day a week spectrum. Two days at work, or 2 days in the office, 2 days at home. The other time, the other.
Is there going to be a way that people can see the summarized data if they want to take a look at it, or is there going to be a follow-up report?
Yeah. So what we'll do is, within the next, I don't know, let's say week or so, we'll put together an infographic that will provide, on LinkedIn, and you folks can send to all your clients, and that will essentially provide a summary of, here's the most salient points and takeaways and trends, and some of the statistics that I mentioned, and hopefully that will give people a nice bit of closure, and perhaps some data to help in their own organization's journey to figure out what is the right policy for them.
Excellent. We're looking forward to it. Okay, so if there's folks out there that want to get a hold of you or Zach, we've talked about this before. You guys can go ahead and email us at Ray. You want to say your email?
Yeah, Ray, REY at thrivehrconsulting.com. Please, let us know, and we'd love to get you connected.
And Heather, you can be found where? In your lovely kitchen?
Yes, in my lovely kitchen. Heather.Simmons, that's with 2 M's, at thrivehrconsulting.com.
And I'm at Jason at thrivehrconsulting.com. Well, this was great. People were really looking forward to this. We were really looking forward to this, and we really thank you guys for coming on and sharing this information. And, as we said, RTO continues to be a major topic for people. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Take care, guys. Have a
Bye.
good day.